Oh, good morning. Wild weekend in the SEC. Ole Miss takes 2 of 3 from the Commodores. And I feel like they punched their ticket to host a regional. Mississippi State loses 2 of 3 to Missouri, the worst team in the league. It was a no-show weekend. Let's just call it like we see it. They're still hanging on to a national seed, but they better be really, really careful going into the last weekend against Alabama. You got to have 2 of 3 this weekend. And we'll see if they get locked in and interested. You know, for senior weekend and at home, and you only have so many opportunities at Dudy Noble Field, that was laying an egg. And I recognize that, you know, it's hard to win. Most SEC schools can, you know, win a game here or there. I recognize that. But I'm still going to ask the question throughout the morning. Were they exposed, or is it just a bad weekend? Are you chalking it up to I think there's a lot of questions to be raised. Both teams, but one's coming off winning 2 of 3 against the Vanderbilt has emerged as the number 1 program in the SEC over LSU the last decade. Now, you know, LSU's still a monster and whatever. You would think they'll get their house back in order. But this has been a revolving door with Vanderbilt, Florida, and LSU. But, you know, Vandy has kind of punched their ticket to the number 1 program in the Southeastern Conference. I know we all know about the scholarship stuff, but the bottom line is they win a lot too. They did not dominate this year like we thought they would, and neither did Florida. But Arkansas has, pretty much. You know, you got to get, even though most of you don't like Van Horn, and maybe even Tony Vitello, and I don't know if you watched that yesterday, but after the Arkansas-Tennessee series, in which Arkansas took 2 or 3, but it was, you know, very competitive and big-time competition. Tony Vitello, who spent 4 seasons, Blake, under Dave Van Horn.
That's correct.
And Dave Van Horn, so they've coached together, were jawing for a while. And you even thought maybe some of the players were going to mix it up, but they got it settled down. And I don't know, maybe they'll meet again. We'll see. Out of Bounds, ESPN 105.9 The Zone, is brought to you by Farm Bureau Insurance. Bundle your auto and home and save with your local Farm Bureau Insurance agent. And the Farm Bureau Insurance call-in line is 601-707-3750. We'll take calls at 8:15. We're about to go 45 minutes of interviews. So 601-707-3750. If you want to get up, get on the phone with us. 8:15 is going to be your time, because then we go into another 23-minute interview with Tom Luganbill at 8:30. So Steve Robertson coming up in a couple of minutes, Parrish Alford at 8 a.m., and Tom Luganbill at 8:30. Do you think that 4 coaches in 4 years may have somewhat caught up with the Mississippi State baseball program? That the lack of continuity to recruit, because, you know, so many of these kids are committing in 9th grade, right? 10th grade. And so you go through Cohen, Canizero, Henderson, and Lemonis. And you went through that whole stretch where you were able to, like, gloss over it, right? I mean, you could have easily fallen apart, but you went to 4 super regionals and 2 college World Series. So at a time when you should have, Ole Miss should have taken advantage of that, having a coach there for 20 years and having continuity and seeing kids, right? 8th, 9th, 10th graders, knowing what's going on, knowing who you want for this class, and this class, would have taken advantage of that time, as Mississippi State was on somewhat shaky ground trying to, figure out a coach that was going to be there for more than 12 months. And so I think it is a question to be asked. I did throw it out on Twitter. Could you have missed in some recruiting because you went through just a ton of coaches? And a lot of the other teams in the league, had the same guys. I don't know. Something to think about, right? Live in the Bank Plus studio, Out of Bounds, ESPN 105.9 The Zone. Nick says it was errors and nothing from the bottom of the lineup that caught up with MSU. I think it's more than that. I also think you got to question, some of your pitching too. And what do you really have? I mean, you got some guys that are really good, but maybe there's been a little too much made of how deep you are as far as the pitching staff. And the frontline pitching's got to step up. That's for sure. McLeod, Bednar, and I guess Fristo. Again, live in the Bank Plus studio, the Out of Bounds show, ESPN 105.9 The Zone. We're streaming live on the Out of Bounds radio app. And this segment is brought to you by Farm Bureau Insurance. Hit favorites.com, bundle your auto and home, and save with your local Farm Bureau Insurance agent in any of the 82 counties. We welcome in Steve Robertson, Hail State Baseball Insider, the Boneyard Podcast, and GenesPage.com. He joins us on the Modelo guest line. Steve, was the Mississippi State baseball team exposed this weekend, or do you just chalk it up as a bad weekend, or a combination of the two?
Well, I think it is a combination of the two. I still think this is a really good baseball team. I think they had a really bad weekend, and I think a lot of it kind of stems with overconfidence. I mean, Tanner Allen and Rowdy Jordan both admitted in postgame Thursday and Friday night, respectively, that they just, the team kind of thought they could show up and, just kind of go through the motions and win 3 ball games. But the bottom line is this is the Southeastern Conference. And it is another stark reminder that in any given day in this league, not only can you get beat, you can get embarrassed. And that's what happened to Mississippi State on Saturday. And it's difficult to find a silver lining in any of that, because State, theoretically, you could still win a share of the SEC. But if State had swept Missouri, they're first place by themselves today with 1 weekend to play. So they absolutely blew it in every aspect of the phrase.
If you've got your two seniors acknowledging that they're not locked in, and then they never locked the team as a whole never locked in over the weekend, how concerned should everybody be?
Well, I think this team has good leadership, but at the same time, too, I think the fact that they're willing to admit that is probably important. It shows some transparency, but at the end of the day, it's on them too. I mean, there's some accountability within them as the leaders of this team to ensure, with so much at stake, that this team is locked in. It falls to them. I mean, the coaches can only do so much, but at the end of the day, you and I both know, because we've been there, what happens in that locker room and kind of that, that camaraderie among the team, that sets the attitude for the weekend and for the season. You got to have everybody bought in. And let's remember, too, there's a lot of these young guys, too, never played SEC baseball before, and so they don't fully appreciate how intense you have to be in every ball game, especially down the stretch. They go to South Carolina, they win a series. It was a very difficult series, and you see South Carolina sweep Kentucky over the weekend. And I think in many respects they thought they had it made, and they didn't, and it's probably going to cost them an SEC championship.
What about a national seed? What do you see from the numbers? How do you feel about it? What do they need to do this weekend?
Well, I think at the bare minimum, they've got to win tomorrow night and then win the series, and then hope the cards fall right, because there were a lot of teams in that top 20 of those NCAA regional hosting sites that had difficult weekends as well. I think State still controls their own destiny. Obviously, if you sweep this week, then I think you remove all doubt. I think you win the series, you're still in good shape, but you probably a little bit of a debate right there. You kind of depend on somebody else to make a mistake. I think the bottom line is State needs to go to Tuscaloosa this weekend and look to win 3 games just to ensure that there is no room for debate. You got to go to Tuscaloosa. And this is an Alabama team that's pretty good. Got RPI 24, so that'll certainly help you kind of help the math in your respect. But all that really matters is that if State goes back and wins this week, they're going to be a top 8 national seed. They'll host a regional and then have the opportunity to host a super regional if they advance.
Who needs to get going in the lineup?
Maybe everybody but Tanner Allen and Scotty DeBruyne. Roddy's been decent. I think I had a discussion yesterday with somebody else that's pretty close to the program. you bring Scotty DeBruyne in, you kind of hope and think maybe he's a two-hole hitter, and in early in the year he wasn't. You get into SEC play, and he wasn't quite there. But he has adjusted his approach to play. He's been outstanding. I don't know if you don't shake it up a little bit and move him up a little higher in the order. I mean, you've got some guys out there that are kind of inconsistent, but I think DeBruyne was one of those guys. You look at every at bat is an absolute war with him, and he's comfortable in every count. And I never expect him to strike out. When he does strike out, I'm surprised. I just think that he's a guy that really handles the bat well. He doesn't try to do too much, and I think that's one of the things on this lineup that happens at times is there are some guys that don't always know who they are. Scotty DeBruyne knows exactly who he is. Now, granted, he's a grad student, so he's had 4 years to know that he's not a guy that's going to hit jacks,
Right.
But I thought last weekend we had a lot of selfish swings. I mean, there were a lot of guys early in counts that dropping shoulders and, trying to hit balls out in the lounge. And, some guys are talented enough to do that. But, when you're down a few runs, you need base runners, you don't need to be up there swinging the first pitch and just F8, F9 the whole ball game. And that's one of the things I think Gotro and Lemonis got to get a handle on this week is, let's get back to hitting line drives, working in the middle of the field, because at South Carolina, that's exactly what happened. State went out there as the aggressor, didn't try to do too much, and before you know it, they're up 2 games and potentially sweeping on Sunday. And just, this past weekend, that same approach I thought was lacking. I thought there was a whole lot of selfish swings and a lot of balls that were just basically non-competitive at bats.
Steve Robertson talking Hail State baseball on the Modelo guest line. They dropped 2 of 3 to the worst team in the league, Missouri, at home. They're still a top 16 seed. They think they're a national seed today. As Steve said, they need to win 3 or 4 to close out the year to make sure that they stay in the top 8 and have a chance to host both postseason weekends. Chris Lemonis, what was his demeanor like after Saturday?
It really, really frustrated, and you could tell, too, I think there was a part of him, too, that I think he was just a little bit shocked. I mean, because that game turned on him in such a major way early on. You're down 8-0. And one of the things I brought up on my show, and I've said this before, and there's a lot of people that love baseball that don't know baseball. And I think Houston Harding in SEC play is better out of the pen, and here's why. And you and I discussed this before privately, but I think Jackson Fristow, you start him as a right-hander, and then they're going to throw some left-handers in that lineup and try to balance things out. Well, then you bring Harding in after he's gone through the order once or twice, and then he can chew up those left-handers. Well, when you announce Houston Harding as the starter, those left-handers don't make it in the lineup. And that's what happened on Saturday is they stacked 9 right-handers in the order, and then the next thing you know, it's 8-0. And so we tried it. It didn't work. Now we can go back and do something a little bit different, go back to what we were doing because, listen, State's been competitive in those Sunday games, and Harding's a big part of that. But I think he is a piece that fits better out of the pen, and I think now we know that. And this whole education of a baseball program is a year-long deal. You don't just throw your best 9 out there the first weekend and then just become, rigid with all that. I think those are the things you look at. You have to kind of adjust, and by the time you get in a regional play, you want to make sure you've got a role for everybody. But yeah, I think we're trending in that direction, but it was a very painful lesson and one that could be historic in its collapse just because of the fact that Mississippi State should be first place in the SEC, but they're not.
Steve Robertson on the Out of Bounds show. What about top-line talent? If Rowdy and Tanner don't come back because of COVID, really got to start asking questions as far as where they'd be. Did it finally catch up with them now that they went through so many coaches, and that is extremely difficult when you're trying to commit kids in 9th and 10th grade? I mean, that they went through Cohen, Canizero, Henderson, and Lemonis, and that there's –
I don't think so. And there probably maybe 1 or 2 guys out there that maybe you didn't get because of that, because you needed some continuity. But Gotro's been here through some of all this, and so it's not like that the staff has been unfamiliar with the players. I mean, remember Andy brought Gotro in off the field first, and then he became the hitting coach, and he was here through Gary, and so you've had some stability in that respect where you hadn't had guys show up thinking, okay, who do we call? Who is our guys? I mean, so I think in that respect you're okay. But, I mean, you make a good point, too. I mean, if it's a typical draft last year, I mean, this is a rebuilding team. I mean, there's no way around it. This is a team that's probably fighting to be 500 in the SEC. Probably a team too that's just trying to get into a regional somewhere to 3. And that's, I think there's some important pieces kind of moving forward. And you mentioned earlier who are some guys that need to step up. I mean, Kellum Clark, I think, adds a dimension to this lineup that you haven't had. And all of a sudden, he seems to be a lot more comfortable in the batter's box in SEC games. And so I think that could be interesting. And I think left field, you just play as a matchup deal, the way you go through this thing. I mean, before it was kind of a platoon deal between Skinner and Cumbus. But, if Clark can handle it defensively, I think you need his bat in order because he's a guy that can turn a game around for you. And I saw something at South Carolina I don't know if I've ever seen in a college game with Kellum Clark. Is, he hit the home run, then he had another ball he rifled out to left. Well, in extra innings, he comes up and he nearly hits a tank down the right field line. And after a one-pitch swing, they decide, let's put him on. I mean, it's like church league softball. It's like, we don't want to take our chances with this guy. So I think he brings some power to the order, but you just got to find a way to get him in there because you may end up having to DH Cam James to ensure that Tanner Leggett plays at third to kind of shore up things defensively. And you hate to be kind of mixing and matching this late in the year, but I think we've kind of learned through the hard way. This is what's got to happen. Leggett's got to play third, Cam's got to DH, and you got to get Kellum Clark in there against right-handers.
Boy, do they need Cam James to get going or what?
Oh, absolutely. And he's walking a lot, and he's doing some things like that first run in the ball game the other night. He hits the ground ball to the right side, so he's doing little stuff. But, they really need him to go on another tear again, have one of these 7 for 16 weekends, really give this team some confidence. Because, listen, hitting 3-hole, he's going to have a lot of RB opportunities hitting behind Rowdy and TA. And so he is willing to take a walk in that 3-hole spot, but you really would like him to be able to mash in 3-hole spot. I mean, you don't really put a guy in there just looking to move the lineup forward. You want a guy that's going to be able to be an RBI producer, and he was earlier in the year. But I think what happens is everybody begins to kind of break down your game and figure out what you can't hit. And so he's seeing a ton of breaking balls, and there have been some times he struggled to kind of pick up the spin. But I'm still a Cam James fan. I know some of our fans are down on him. People forget he's still a freshman. This is his first trip to the SEC. And so I still expect him to have a big career at Mississippi State. There's some things you got to figure out. But everybody, even Clark and Palmero, had some struggles early on.
Out of bounds, ESPN 105.9 The Zone. Steve Robertson, genespage.com, joins us on the Modelo guest line. Hey, let's go to the pitching staff. You fully expect Fristow to be back in the rotation this weekend?
I don't know that I would say I fully expect it back. I would say that's a real probability at this point because I think maybe the time off has been good for him too. Maybe let him watch a little bit and also to kind of rest his arm some. He's a very talented young guy. To me, that combo just makes sense. You throw McLeod as a lefty and come back with Brandon Smith as a righty and hope to get it to your bullpen. And, on Saturday, Bednar has been your most consistent guy and didn't have his best stuff on Saturday, but kind of gutted it through and got a win. And you never expected to be in that situation. But I think you feel better about Saturday probably than at any day than the rest of your weekend. And he's your game two guy. And then I think you pair up Fristow and Hootie, and then all of a sudden you've kind of got that whole righty-lefty deal working for you. I think one of the things that needs to happen is, we talk about Landon Sims, has probably been underutilized a little bit, and it's important to remember that he is a freshman. People say, they're using Cobb so much at Arkansas. Yeah, he's a senior and a former starter, too. He's a guy that kind of knows how to take care of his arm. He's not a young guy anymore, and has been phenomenal for Arkansas. But you got to find somebody that can close out a ball game besides Landon Sims. Yeah. Maybe that's Preston Johnson. I don't know, but maybe you don't pair up Preston Johnson with Landon Sims. Maybe you move Landon Sims to do your Friday, Sunday stuff, and then you have Preston Johnson do Saturday stuff. But that's going to have to happen. I mean, and listen, the reason that fans are always calling for Sims is because they know they can trust him. They know he's going to come out there and throw strikes.
Right.
State's got to find somebody else that can handle that on Saturdays.
Do you think they would be open? I think they've done it one time this year, but you've been to all the games. Do you think that they would be open to pitching Landon depending on pitch count the first time around, twice this weekend against Alabama if needed?
Well, I think you have to. And, they threw him twice, I guess, against Ole Miss. And,
okay.
He's had some experiences. He's told us, in media that there have been plenty of times on Sundays where he's been physically prepared and ready to go, but the game just didn't dictate it. Like they would be an opportunity, a save opportunity coming up, but then State would extend the ball game so they would sit him down. And you don't want to pitch him just to pitch him, and so, if I look back last week, and that's one of the things you look back in hindsight and say, you know what, we probably should have made a call here. When State cut it to 10-8, I think I'm bringing Sims in, even though, you still got 4 innings to go.
Absolutely.
Just to kind of slow the game down. Maybe I can get 2 innings out of him, and then I can piece it together on the back end. But because you feel like, if you could ever take a lead there, you're probably okay. And then ultimately you don't, because as soon as you go back out there, you give up 2 more runs. Now it's a 12-8 ball game, so the whole idea of bringing Sims in doesn't make any sense. But if you bring him in initially, then all of a sudden you can hold the game in place. But who knew at that point, how the rest of that game was going to play out? It's just such a gamble when to use them and when not to. But you got to make sure when you throw them out there, it's an even or an advantage situation, so you get a win. You don't want to waste him in a loss.
And you think they're going to ride with Hancock at first, obviously DeBruyne at second, Forsythe at short, and Leggett at third?
Yeah, I think that's the best defensive lineup today. And, we had a stretch there. We played, 3 straight consecutive clean games, and that was the defensive order that you had out defensively. And you got some guys you put in as defensive replacements late, and I think a lot of that's just to kind of keep those guys engaged, because you are trading a little defense for offense at first base, for trading Hatcher for Hancock. And listen, give Luke some credit too. I mean, we kind of saw him taking some in and out at first. I give Mike Nemeth credit for noticing it first. He goes, hey, notice that Luke's taking some in and out at first, and he had been a catcher the majority of the time. But I think Leggett's a guy too, is a glue guy. He's played every position on the infield other than catcher. And you need a guy like that. You need a utility guy. And I think, when you look at how smooth he is, fielding the ball in the short hop and sell himself firing across the diamond, I think right now he's probably your best option at third base. And so, and again, with him, you're trading away some offense for some defense, but he had a couple big hits over the weekend. So hopefully he can kind of get going too. But you've got the pieces. I think that's the challenge for Chris Lemonis now. It's just kind of gambling and figuring this thing out. Okay, are we going to have to be an extremely offensive team today? Or are we going to have to be a team that's going to be buttoned up and playing it really well and clean defensively? You'd like to be able to do both, but I just don't know that this team is capable of doing that consistently.
We'll leave it there. Steve Robertson, the Boneyard Podcast, 247 Sports, genespage.com on the Modelo guest line. Steve, thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
See you soon.
The Out of Bounds Show, an SEC Insider hit this morning, is brought to you by Farm Bureau Insurance. Bundle your auto and home and save with your local Farm Bureau Insurance agent in any of the 82 counties in the state of Mississippi. We're streaming live on the Out of Bounds radio app. Wild weekend in college baseball. Some college football news, too, that we need to hit at some point. Maybe 8:15 we'll jump into that. I know Tom Luganville at 8:30 will do that for 23 minutes. Parrish Alford coming up next. DJournal.com, Ole Miss Insider. Rebs take the series against the Commodores 2-3. They'll now be hosting a regional. What else can shake out as we go into the final weekend of the 30-game SEC schedule? We're live in the Bank Plus studio. Parrish Alford.